Hi, I'm Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. In this video, I'm continuing my analysis into Nietzsche's Will to Power. I'm, as you know, using the Walter Kaufmann translation. This is section 9.2 in the notes. The notes can be retrieved from clicking the link in the description field or the banner ad that will pop up. I've recently updated the notes. We're on page 46 of the notes, and this is going to cover section 267 to 273. So with that, let's begin. Alright, this is Will to Power. And we're in section 9.2. And it covers notes 267 through 273. Okay. Alright, let's begin. Nietzsche doesn't explicitly talk about, per se, two types of morality, but I pulled this conception from the text. Specifically, we're going to start with note 268. So let me just show you what he says there, if I can find it. 268. Well, he says, two types of morality must not be confused. The morality with which the healthy instinct defends itself against insipid decadence, and another morality with which this very decadence defines and justifies itself and leans downward. The former is usually stoical, hard, tyrannical. Stoicism itself was such a break-shoe morality. The latter is enthusiastic, sentimental, full of secrets. It has the woman and beautiful feeling on inside. So I've defined the two from that. I've defined two types of morality. The first, so these would be two types of morality. This is a very general account, right? First is what's known as stoical. Stoical morality. To be stoic is to be reserved, sort of austere in your disposition. A, quote, morality with which the healthy instinct defends itself against insipid decadence. Right? It's a defense, a morality, a morality that defends decadence. Right? Stoical morality is a morality that defends against decadence. Right? That's the idea of a stoical morality. And obviously decadence is overindulgence, right? There is a sense in which you can be reserved. It defends against this decadence, but the type of decadence might not be what you initially think. The second is obviously Christian morality. Christian morality, quote, a morality with which this very decadence defines and justifies itself and leans downward, right? The decadence of what, right? He doesn't say explicitly what this decadence is in note 268. I read you the entirety of note 268. And as we know, the notes weren't meant to necessarily be contiguous, chronologically contiguous, because they were written at different dates. So there's any number of interpretations that decadence might refer to. Decadence insofar as the exaltation of the sacerdotal class, right? Insofar as that class becomes the ruling class for the elites and sort of a top-down power structure, right? Decadent in that sense. Decadent in the sense that all of morality is tied up with the false, what Nietzsche considers to be the false conception, as we saw in the last section, of moral phenomena. Decadent in that sense, right? So many different ways of the saturation of moral judgments and commandments and orders and demands placed on any particular moral agent. That decadence, or in a Kantian deontological sense, the categorical imperative, and the fact that it applies universally to all individuals, not even so far as their actions are concerned, that's after the fact, but before the fact, the ideas that they have in their head, decadent, right? So just an oversaturation of moral moral phenomena, an oversaturation with judgment, an oversaturation with the structure, morality as sort of the supreme system. So Nietzsche is done with all of it, right? And he says that this system, the Christian moral system, the Christian moral tradition, is one in which decadence rules, right? Decadence rules and defines this system, right? Let's not forget what he said earlier. I forget the exact note. I want to say it was 170, but I can't believe we're 100 notes off already from that point. But it was one of the earlier notes where Nietzsche actually talked about the contradiction and the misinterpretation within the Christian tradition with respect to the symbolic order of things and the idea that that symbolism was translated literally. So that when we talk about the resurrection, we're talking about the resurrection of actual bodies, dead people. Lazarus is an example. Rather than a rebirth in terms of a new worldview. Decadence in that sense, right? So you can think of a system that defines itself in terms of this oversaturation, this indulgence, this as he says, incipient drive towards the decadent, right? To this continual saturation, if you will. Christian morality for Nietzsche is exemplified by this characteristic. Here I have to read all of 269, so I'll go through and I'll read 269. I want to see some of the quotes that I have here. So I'm going to read all of 269. This is in Will to Power, so I encourage you to read along with me. As I'm reading, I'll take notes and then I'll go through and I'll look at the notes that I already have. So this will be note 269. To get the whole of moralizing into focus as a phenomenon, also as a riddle. I love riddles. The phenomena of morality, right? The phenomena of morality have occupied me like riddles. Today, I would know how to answer the question. And what's the question? What does it mean that the welfare of my neighbor ought to possess for me a higher value than my own? Right? So we have me, we have my neighbor. Hi, neighbor. We have me, we have my neighbor, and what we're saying is that the welfare, right? The welfare of my neighbor, he says, what does it mean that the welfare of my neighbor ought to possess for me a higher value than my own, right? So I'm directed my concerns for welfare towards my neighbor rather than back on myself. What does that mean? But that my neighbor himself ought to assess the value of his welfare differently than I. That is, that he should subordinate it to my welfare, right? He should subordinate his welfare to my welfare. What is the meaning of that thou shalt, right? That command. Right? The command that I was talking about before, which even philosophers regard as a given, right? The command that thou shalt treat your neighbor as you would treat yourself, right? Or in a Kantian sort of negative formation of the golden rule, instead of saying do unto others as you would have them do unto you, it is do not do to others what you would not have them do to you. Still, right? This command that I am responsible morally, ethically, to exalt the concerns of my neighbor, the welfare of my neighbor, in the sense of charity, above my own considerations, right? What does that mean? The apparently crazy idea that a man should esteem, I love this part, right? The apparently crazy idea that a man should esteem the actions he performs for another more highly than he performs for himself, and that this other should likewise do the same. That is, one should call good only those actions that a man performs with an eye, not to himself, but to the welfare of others. So that this becomes the command. Thou shalt consider the welfare of your neighbor, right, more so than yourself, and that is what we will define as the good. Right? And that is what we will define as the good. So we've seen Nietzsche discuss this